sing we our joyful song of peace. For the mountains, hills, and pastures in their silent majesty, for the stars, for all the heavens, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the sun, for rain and thunder, for the seasons' harmony, for our lives, for all creation, sing we our joyful praise to Thee. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe truth is larger than any one book or way. Religion and science go hand in hand. Integrity requires freedom of conscience. Diversity is something to celebrate. In the struggle for justice, we come alive. Our highest aspiration and calling is love. For the world we raise our voices, for the home that gives us birth. In our joy we sing, returning home to our blue-green hills of earth. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your path that you are on, you are welcome here.
We come together with our tired minds and bodies, with our confusion and questions, our uncertainties and our fears. We come together with our hopes, with our pasts and our ideas, our passions and our faith. We come together bringing all of who we are, trusting that in gathering we will be renewed, and that together we can create the world we long for.
Well, happy St. Patty's Day, everyone. I see a lot of green out there. Very good. I love it. Welcome to everyone to West Shore Church. Best place to be on a Sunday morning here in Cleveland. I will keep on saying that every Sunday. I believe it every Sunday. West Shore has so much good that's going on. I hope you'll check the West Shore Weekly to get a sense of what some of these cool ways are in which you can get to know people, grow friendships deeper, grow deeper in your spirit. Take a look at the first page, for example, right there in the middle. Today, new photo exhibit, Unleashed and Truth. Y'all see that? Renee Jones Empowerment Center created a multifaceted approach to helping victims and survivors of human trafficking. Go to that show there in the fireside room. It's fantastic. Check that out. Flip the page. Again, so many different things, but second side, third item down, pancake breakfast fundraiser. Can I hear a shout out for sausage? Maybe a little bit. There you go. That's next week after the service, Baker Hall. Come on and help our youth go to Summer UU Church Camp. That's what that's all about. So be on the lookout for that next Sunday. Oh my gosh, and right below it, Ostara celebration hosted by West Shore's Paganis group, Sunday, March 24th, 12 o'clock. You want to check that out too. Fantastic. What a wonderful, interesting experience. And then at the bottom of the page, that's a reminder that next Saturday is the memorial service for longtime member Dave Prock. And I hope everyone will be able to come to that next Saturday at 11 a.m. As I write my eulogy for Dave, I'm looking for stories about him. So I just want to invite folks who knew Dave and have a story or two that you'd like to share about that really a brilliant, interesting, fascinating person. Send that to me. Send it by email to me to help me with writing that eulogy. Once again, just lots of cool stuff happening. Check it out. Now, let me ask, if you were here for the first or second time and you do not mind people knowing that, raise your arm. Whoa, welcome, folks. Welcome, glad you're here. Thanks for coming this morning. So we're going to move on into our greeting time. Be sure that the folks who raise their hands, be sure to check them out, talk to them, welcome them warmly to West Shore. And the greeting will end with the sounding of the bowl. So let's go for it. Let's greet each other. Woo! Megan Kelly, folks. Give her a round of applause. Megan Kelly.
Good morning, West Shore. If you didn't hear, my name is Megan Kelly, not the Megan Kelly from Fox News, the Megan Kelly from West Shore, the much, much nicer one. This year, I'm standing here before you because I am lucky enough to co-chair the annual pledge drive with my partner in crime, Kip Bolin, who is unable to be with us today. For those of you who are new to West Shore, either brand new or slightly new, what is West Shore's annual pledge drive? Well, essentially, it's our fundraising campaign. So think NPR when they're asking for pledges and commitments over the radio waves, or for those of you who may remember the Jerry Lewis telethons for muscular dystrophy. Does anyone remember those? Telethons! More recently, fundraising campaigns are on social media platforms, Facebook and whatnot. So we're doing our fundraising campaign for West Shore, and for many of us, as opposed to NPR and all the other wonderful things out there, this one, for many of us, is much more personal and closer to home. We're currently working on our campaign, and by we, I mean not just me and Kip, I mean Rev Anthony and Sue Hannah and Diane Alcorn and Debbie Elliott. A shout out to the group that does a lot of work on this. Thank you. And we're planning some really cool events that we hope you join us. We are planning a coffee house, a bowling party. We're going to have a bowling party. We're going to have these fun events. So please keep your eyes peeled for the details to come, and we hope you join us. Our theme this year is the church you choose. So think of it like the family you choose, not the family you're born into, but the family you choose. Many of us did not grow up as you-yous. We're choosing to be here. We're not obligated to be here, and we're choosing to be here not just today, not just for this service, but the 8 billion ways you can get involved at West Shore. Anthony just pointed some of them out in the West Shore Weekly. So we have many personal reasons why we want this church to continue to succeed. It engages us in our daily lives. So with that, we have an exercise for you this morning, not like the lifting weights kind of exercise, but we have an exercise. In your order of service, you have a 3x5 card. We're going to take a moment. We're going to ask you to pull out that card, pull out a pen or a pencil. If you don't have a pencil, raise your hand and an usher will help you out. And we'd like you to take a moment to answer this question on the card, and we're going to collect it in the baskets. The question is, why is West Shore the church you choose? Why is West Shore the church you choose? And we're doing this exercise for 2 reasons. One, we want you to take a moment and reflect on what about West Shore is important to you. But secondly, your feedback is going to help us guide our pledge campaign. So we'll take a moment for you to fill that out. Why is West Shore the church you choose? All right. Thank you, thank you. When the baskets come around, please put those cards in the basket. We are excited about this year's pledge drive and the campaign. We want you to be excited too. Please, please, please come to our pledge events. They're going to be fun. Please, please, please respond to our outreaches, whether it's your pledge form or if it's a phone call or an email. Please, please, please help us out there. We're excited to build the momentum around this pledge drive. We want to keep it going, and we want to see this church continue to succeed. So thank you for your time. The offering will now be received. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm going to need a bigger card because I'm going to need I'm not kidding. I'm going to need every one of you to come put your name on my card because this is the reason I choose this church. Today's reading comes from writer and poet Robert Bly, entitled "The Long Bag We Drag Behind Us." When we were 1 or 2 years old, we had what we might visualize as a 360-degree personality. Energy radiated out from all parts of our body and all parts of our psyche. A child running is a living globe of energy. We had a ball of energy, all right, but one day we noticed that our parents didn't like certain parts of that ball. They said things like, "Can't you be still?" Or, "It isn't nice to try and kill your brother." Same. Behind us, we have an invisible bag. And the parts of us that our parents don't like, to keep our parents' love, put in the bag. By the time we go to school, our bag is quite large. Then our teachers have their say. Good children don't get angry over such little things. So we take our anger and we put it in the bag. By the time my little brother and I were 12, in Madison, Minnesota, we were known as the nice Bly Boys. Our bags were already a mile long. Then we do a lot of bag stuffing in high school. This time, it's no longer the evil grown-ups that pressure us, but people our own age. So the students' paranoia about grown-ups can be misplaced. I lied all through high school automatically to try to be more like the basketball players. Any part of myself that was even a little bit slow went into that bag. My sons are going through the process now. I watched my daughters who are older experience it. I noticed with dismay how much they put into the bag. But there was nothing their mother or I could do about it. Often my daughters seemed to make their decisions on the basis of fashion and collective ideas of beauty. And they suffered as much damage from other girls as they did from men. In Christian culture, sexuality usually goes into the bag. With it goes much spontaneity. Psychologist Marie-Louise von Franz warns us, on the other hand, not to sentimentalize indigenous cultures by assuming that they have no bag at all. She says, in effect, that they have a different but sometimes even larger bag. They may put individuality into the bag, or inventiveness, what anthropologists know as participation mystique, or a mysterious communal mind. Sounds lovely, but it can mean that tribal members all know exactly the same thing, and no one knows anything else. It's possible that bags for all human beings are about the same size. We spend our life until we're 20 deciding what parts of ourselves to put into the bag. And we spend the rest of our lives trying to get them out again. Here ends today's reading.
awesome. So here's a word for you: enlightenment. Enlightenment. Enlightenment is a word that puts its finger on a dearly desired state of being, to move from ignorance to enlightenment. And I thought I knew what that meant, but then a paradoxical saying from the great psychologist Carl Jung came knocking at my door. The saying was, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the shadow conscious." What do you think about that? Are you familiar with the psychological concept of the shadow and the work of making it conscious? Jungian analyst Robert Johnson says that to honor and to accept one's shadow is a profound spiritual discipline. It is, he says, the most important experience of a lifetime. Well, if you're like me, you're a you on a spiritual journey. I want to find out more, right? Sounds pretty amazing. Some of you look unconvinced. Everybody say, "Amen." Let's check this thing out, right? Thank you. Let's get in here. Let's get in this. Now, Carl Jung, with all his provocative ideas, came into my life in college. But long before that, in middle school, I'd read something that actually was my first literary lesson about the shadow. It was 7th or 8th grade, and I spotted on the library shelf a book entitled "The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde" by Robert Louis Stevenson. So it gripped me. It gripped me. I came away from that with a complicated insight about how people work. That when a person's conscious part is one way, it will be balanced by a part of the unconscious that is the opposite way. If the conscious part is all light, the unconscious part is going to be opposite to that, equal and opposite to that. It's going to be all shadow. And so in Stevenson's book, you have Dr. Jekyll. He portrays the conscious part of the man, the part who is a perfect gentleman. He is all good to the extreme. He therefore functions very well in society. But then comes the horrific discovery: his conscious part is not all that there is to him. There is another part. It is buzzing with energy. It possesses its own personality and point of view. This part, existing outside of consciousness, calls itself Mr. Hyde. And Mr. Hyde is the opposite of a perfect gentleman. Usually, this shadow part hides, Mr. Hyde hides, but under certain circumstances, Mr. Hyde takes over to let off steam in the form of very socially unacceptable behaviors. And when the steam has been let off sufficiently, he goes back into hiding again, and Dr. Jekyll reasserts control. You know, it's as if Robert Louis Stevenson, that Christian Scottish writer of the 19th century, was applying ancient wisdom, Asian ancient wisdom, coming from thousands of miles away, applying that to his understanding of what it means to be a human being. This wisdom is that of the principle of yin and yang, which teaches that everything in existence is made up of qi, of energy, in some combination of opposite but interconnected, mutually perpetuating forces. Day and night, strong and weak, good and evil. The principle of yin and yang says that you can't have one without the other, and at their extremes, they even turn into each other, so that when night gets darkest, day is right around the corner. Too much strength, and that plants the seeds of weakness. And directly to the point of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the harder we try to be pure and good, the harder we fall. Of course, we need not travel all the way to China for this insight. Wisdom from ancient Greece, carried into medieval times and then into the Renaissance, spoke of the all-important virtue of temperance. Now, the tarot originated during the Renaissance, and here is its portrayal of this virtue. Wow, that is really a distorted picture. That's not what my tarot cards look like. Okay, but generally you get the picture. Temperance says that people with strength and integrity of character are that way because they live at the balance between extremes. Within themselves, they sense both light and shadow forces. Outside of themselves, they sense the same thing. But rather than clinging to one opposite and banishing the other, they stay connected to each. The angel in the tarot card represents this as an action of mixing liquid from two different jars, mixing liquid together. Mix and keep on mixing them. Above all, that prevents each of the opposites from staying apart, because when you separate them and they stay apart, that causes them to become increasingly extreme and increasingly explosive. This lesson, this temperance lesson, is crucial. It's no less than the Archangel Michael, the strongest archangel of them all, that is on this tarot card, demonstrating this truth. Now, a moment ago, when speaking about the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I mentioned that the Mr. Hyde part is usually hidden, but that under certain circumstances, he appears, he takes over control, he lets off steam in the form of socially crude and unacceptable behaviors, and when that steam has been let off sufficiently and psychic balance has been reestablished, he goes back into hiding again, and Dr. Good Guy, right, reasserts control. Now, how this happens in the book, it's pretty interesting, but it is not at all true to real life, not in the least. In real life, this is what the showing forth of the shadowy Mr. Hyde can look like in us. Sometimes it looks like a person becoming different at the flick of a switch. Do you know, for example, anyone who is usually gentle as a lamb, but when they get behind the steering wheel, woo! Watch out! Watch out! You know what I'm talking about? You know someone like that? How many of you like that? The lamb. Suddenly all lion. Suddenly all lion. The lamb become lion is an aggressive driver. The lamb become lion. They speed, they tailgate others, they weave in and out of traffic, they run red lights. There can even be road rage. And you know, if the lamb become lion is not actually behind the wheel, well, they're going to be the obnoxiously picky side seat driver. Do you know some of those? Or the obnoxious backseat driver telling you what you need to do. But where, oh where, did that sweet little lamb person you used to know go? It happens at the flick of a switch. The Mr. Hyde within, hiding, is all of a sudden there in all his ugliness. Does this ring any bells? It is a truism that depending on our circumstances, the situation we're in, or the role we happen to be playing, different parts of us are going to come out. But some situations and some roles are more likely than others to trigger the shadowy Mr. Hyde part, who will bring trouble and shame to our other part, the conscious part, the Dr. Jekyll part we are most used to, that part that works hard to maintain social appropriateness and acceptability. We all know today happens to be St. Patrick's Day, and a day like this can be a trigger for the shadowy Mr. Hyde to want to come out. Halloween and Mardi Gras also. All are publicly affirmed times of partying and turning social norms upside down. What happens when you're not wearing green? What's supposed to happen? What? No, seriously, someone tell me the answer to that. What happens when someone doesn't wear green? They get pinched. Now, is that not an inversion of social norms? Seriously. Usually we shake hands or hug or say hello, but St. Patty's Day, all of a sudden we're pinching people. So all of a sudden that's fine. Along comes St. Patty's Day and things get weird. Look at this picture from Chicago. You live in Chicago, they dye the entire river. They dye that sucker green. That's weird. That is not normal. Savannah, Georgia, you know what they do in Savannah, Georgia? They dye green all of the public fountains downtown. That's not normal. Other towns and other cities, they have their different versions of not normal. Most everywhere there's going to be a parade. Bars are going to offer drink specials and St. Patty's Day events. Things are going to feel electric with the promise of letting off steam. The inner Mr. Hyde naturally feels called out. And if a person's psychic balance is generally okay, not too off, one's Mr. Hyde might actually just be kind of super fun to hang out with. He's going to indulge in maybe one or two green beers, maybe a little bit of festivity, a little bit of mischief, and call it a day. But if a person's usual Dr. Jekyll self has been too extremely good, they've been living too extremely good, well, you know, Mr. Hyde is going to want to come out with guns blazing. St. Patty's Day often sees plenty of drunk driving, property damage, disrespect towards authority, public urination and vomiting, and general mayhem. Many of the people doing this, when they recover, they will say, I don't know what came over me. Who was that party animal? Well, it was your inner Mr. Hyde on extreme mode. The harder we try to be good and pure, the harder we try to be good and pure, the harder we fall. The principle of yin and yang is not just some woo-woo spirituality. Temperance is not a key spiritual ideal for nothing. The author of Owning Your Own Shadow, Robert A. Johnson, and I highly recommend this book, shares a story about yet a different kind of situation that triggers a person's shadow to stop hiding and come out. Essentially, it is any sort of situation preceded by a time when someone or something was particularly trying to your patience, but you gritted your teeth. You forced yourself to stay calm and good, and you outlasted the frustration successfully. All right? Here's Robert Johnson's story of this. I remember, he says, a weekend when I was putting up with very difficult guests who stayed days beyond their invitation. I exercised Herculean patience and courtesy, and I sighed in great relief when they left. I thought I had earned something nice by my virtue, so I went down to the nursery to buy something beautiful for my garden, and before I knew what was happening, I picked a fight with the nursery man and made a miserable spectacle of myself. And that's the story. And I want you to listen to how Robert Johnson, the Jungian analyst, explains this. He says, since I did not pick up my shadow consciously, I landed it accidentally on that poor stranger. Balance was served, but in a clumsy and stupid way. Now, isn't that interesting? Has your patience ever been tested by some very frustrating situation? You passed that test, but you did not take a moment to consciously pick up your shadow, and I'm going to talk about what exactly that means more in a moment. You didn't do that. So later on, before you even knew what was happening, your Mr. Hyde came out and restored psychic balance. It restored the balance between yin and yang within you, and it did that by acting nastily towards a cashier. Or you were rude towards the waiter or waitress, or you were mean to your kid, or you said something crappy to your partner, or you kicked your dog. I mean, do you know what I'm talking about? This story is particularly important because it underscores how any effort to completely eliminate one shadow or keep it repressed indefinitely, it's bound to fail. No matter how hard or how long you grit your teeth and try only to be good and virtuous, that effort is always going to fail. In fact, the more the shadow is resisted, the more it persists. At least to my mind, the classic and tragic / ironic demonstration of this truth, it's the conservative Christian pastor who thunders again and again from the pulpit about sexual purity and the immortality of homosexuality. And then one day in the news, you see something. What do you think you see? How they were caught in a same-sex act of public lewdness. How many of you have seen that? The shadow, the disowned, disavowed, excluded traits and powers of our personality, the inner Mr. Hyde. Oh, it's here to stay. The Mr. Hyde shadow can even come out in a way that transcends the personal. Carl Jung, that key source of wisdom about the shadow, was particularly struck by its collective dimension. He said, to the individual, it is incredible that his shadow side of little foibles and weaknesses should ever in any circumstances go beyond himself. But let these harmful little creatures join into a mass, and there rises up a raging monster. And each individual is only one tiny cell in that monster's body, so that for better or for worse, he must accompany it on its bloody rampages and even assist it to the utmost. That's what Carl Jung said. What it means is the shadow of separate individuals can form a mass and become a raging monster. It is what happened in Germany. Germany in the 19th century was a preeminent nation of scientific enlightenment, philosophical lucidity, and it was a bastion of European civilization. And then in the 20th century, what happened? It flip-flopped. It was transformed into the Nazi juggernaut, and it committed some of the worst human rights atrocities history has ever seen, including the Holocaust. Genuine monsters can rise, collective monsters composed of the individual shadow cells of multiple people, all finding resonance with each other, all vibrating to the same tune of malice. Oh my God, I'm sorry I keep on mentioning the name Donald Trump. I know we are all tired of that dude. But you know, he just continues to be a prime illustration of so many psychological concepts. He just does. He is a master at inviting the shadow to come out in people. He is a master at that. Witness one of his rallies for yourself, okay? Witness how they are, as the Washington Post says, festivals of grievance and retribution, or dystopian visions of darkness and despair, or of bacchanalia, of lies and mistruths. Individual shadow cells resonating to the common tune of outrage and emergency, becoming a movement, a collective shadow being at Trump's command. Whether individually or collectively, our shadow is going to find a way to come out. And so the question now becomes, what does all of this imply about our common human condition? How might we consciously pick up the shadow, as Robert Johnson says, rather than the shadow coming out in ways that are destructive to others and to ourselves? And as we turn to this vital question, it is important to first and foremost understand the original reason why you and I and everyone grow up to have all these different parts, the light parts and the shadow parts both. And you heard the reading from earlier, poet Robert Bly's article entitled The long bag we drag behind us. Did you remember, did you hear how the child, a ball of energy, a globe of energy, and then one day we noticed our parents, they didn't like certain parts of that ball of energy. They said things like, "Can't you be still?" So we all have that bag, that invisible bag behind us. And the parts that our primary caregivers didn't like, we put them in that bag to keep their love, to stay safe. We put it in that bag. By the time we get to school, that bag is already quite large. Then our teachers have their say, right? Good children don't get angry over such little things. I used to daydream a lot, apparently, when I was in first grade. Have you ever read your report cards from all those years ago? Apparently, in the first grade, I spent most of the time daydreaming. And you know what? I had put that in the bag. I had to put that in the bag so I could get to second grade. We put all the stuff in the bag. And then, of course, we heard Robert Bly say, by the time my brother and I were 12 in Madison, Minnesota, we were known as the nice Bly boys. Our bags were already a mile long. I was one of the nice Makar boys. Oh, yeah. Miles long, the bag behind. Can you relate? How long is your bag? How long is your bag? This socialization process, it happens most intensely in the first half of life, because that is when we are developing the basics of our personality. That is when we are growing into our gender orientation. That is when we go through school. That is when we learn the social graces. That is when we seek career success. That is when we cultivate important relationships. That is when we engage the busyness of adult life. And as David Richo, the author of Shadow Dance, says, he says, to gain and maintain approval, we may have had to exhibit only the personality that was acceptable to our parents. Later in life, we may have persisted in that self-negating routine with other adults, our partners and our peers. Now, I want you to notice especially that language of the self-negating routine. Can you relate to that? The self-negating routine? When we speak of socialization or enculturation, self-negation, self-policing is an integral part of that. And you know what is most tragic about self-negation? Listen to David Richo again. He says, by hiding the personality traits that were considered objectionable, we lost out. We lost out on our chance to rework them and to move through them. Instead, they just simply went underground. Qualities that required only some sanding and polishing. They were confined to the cellar, our unconscious, and they were made to be useless, and they became even dangerous. Given the chance, he says, an ugly aggressiveness might have been trimmed to assertiveness. Unwelcome controlling ways might have been spruced up into efficient leadership. Fear might have even become love. That's what he says. This passage is so important because it affirms that the Mr. Hyde within that is hiding However ugly and disturbing his appearances, right, make the Dr. Jekyll part of you, no matter how evil it may seem, he was not originally that. The Mr. Hyde was not originally evil at all. The shadow is not fundamentally evil. All you had originally were childish behaviors. Being childishly selfish, being childishly loud, being childishly controlling, being childishly this and that. If these parts had not been cut off via the old self-negating routine, they would have evolved like everything else in you into more civilized behaviors. But they were cut off. You had to negate them to survive. And as Robert Bly tells us, when we put a part of ourselves in the bag, it regresses. It devolves towards barbarism. And then Bly asks, suppose a young man seals a bag at 20 and then waits 15 or 20 years before he opens it again in midlife. What will he find? Sadly, the sexuality, the wildness, the impulsiveness, the anger, the freedom he put in there, they've all regressed. They are not only primitive in mood, they are hostile to the person who opens the bag. The man who opens the bag at 45, or the woman who opens her bag, rightly feels fear. She glances up. She sees against the wall the shadow of an ape passing by. And anyone seeing that would be frightened. And that's Robert Bly. Confronting the shadow can indeed be a daunting prospect, especially when you come to it in the second half of life, as most people do, because this time of life traditionally is A, when people have more time to focus on psychological healing and spiritual growth, and B, the buildup of pressures in a person to become more balanced can no longer be denied. Here's the typical pattern. The typical pattern is something like this. By middle age, you have spent all your life up to that time pressuring yourself to live up to social expectations and pushing away the shadow with its contrary urges. It means you're exhausted. It means that life can feel empty and dry. Where's the adventure? Where's the joy? Well, you don't feel it because most of your energy is tied up in the self-negating routine and policing your various inner parts to stay the heck away from the light of conscious day. And beyond all this, in the unconscious, what you have are vast energy reserves. The shadow buzzes with energy. It's there for the taking, but you got to watch out. It's all that energy is shadow energy. Shadow seethes with energy, but it's hostile to consciousness. It's been exiled for so many years. It's degraded, positively uncivilized. On top of that, it's resentful because you put it in the bag. This psychic situation is not tenable. There will be a breaking point, but let it be as the poet Anais Nin once said. She said, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. At some point in anyone's life, facing their inner Mr. Hyde, their shadow, is imperative to heal the radical separation of the light and shadow sides within oneself, to honor the principle of yin and yang and its wisdom of the complementarity of the opposites, to mix light and shadow parts together, as the Tarot's temperance card reminds us, so that our character can experience transformation. If you want transformation, this is the way. The key piece of advice comes to us from Robert Johnson. How then, he asks, can one produce something of beauty or goodness without doing an equal amount of wreckage? Is it possible to live one's ideals, do one's best, be courteous, do well at work, and lead a decent, civilized life if we have to ritually acknowledge this other dimension of reality? Now, the unconscious, he says, cannot tell the difference between a real act and a symbolic one. This means, he says, that we can aspire to beauty and goodness and pay out that darkness in a symbolic way. Now follow me here. It's my understanding here at West Shore that annual meetings used to be a little bit longer, maybe quite a long longer than they are now, because they always included something called the Feast of Fools. Am I getting that right? The Feast of Fools, okay? So my understanding of it is this: all year long, people at West Shore have been busy living up to the Unitarian Universalist principles and purposes, and busy working in all sorts of teams and committees, leaders and followers alike, all year long. But then would come the annual meeting, culminating with the Feast of Fools, which was essentially a ritualistic way of paying out the darkness, of letting off steam, of taking a break from all the goodness and all the propriety and all the positive effort. No one was exempt from being roasted. I am led to understand. Watch out, board president. Watch out, Mr. Music Director. He's got his back to me. He knows, he knows. Watch out, Mr. Senior Minister Man. It's just a great illustration of what Robert Johnson is trying to say. What he's saying we ought to do. We find a way to pay out the darkness in a symbolic way so that our Unitarian Universalist community efforts to do good don't become too good, too unbalanced, too extreme. I want to stay on this topic of community shadow rituals for a moment more before we turn to some individual shadow rituals. Often in churches, the liturgical solution that is about encouraging respectful behaviors towards each other, okay? Often that involves some kind of unison affirmation reading of some very positive language, some positive covenant. The classic James Velo Blake covenant goes like this. You may recognize it. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Isn't that lovely? And don't get me wrong, I love it. But the solution it proposes to encourage mutually respectful behavior is all light. And in no way is the shadow side of church community acknowledged and honored. I'm sorry, everything in existence is a shadow side, including church community. And when I say the shadow side of church community, I'm talking about times when we're feeling tired about being so good, and we're feeling the itch to nitpick our fellow congregants. We're feeling the itch to gossip. Woo! But the juicy tidbits. We feel the delicious itch to focus on how this person and that person can be just so irritating. Yes, even beloved church community has a shadow side. So it makes me wonder if periodically a better ritual could be that of something called burying the hatchet. That's a hatchet in that hole. Now, I know, the Dr. Jekyll, all positivity, all goodness, sensibility. To that part of us, this ritual sounds crude and outrageous. But you know, the Mr. Hyde shadow side in us is going to feel tremendously satisfied by that image of the hatchet, which holds together in one symbol all the ways in which we might be kind of feeling irritated by each other, feel a little bit of that shadow side of beloved community. And then we bury it. Once a year, we discharge all that excess shadow energy that's going to get discharged anyway, but in less constructive ways, through, as I said earlier, nitpicking, gossip, general crankiness. Does this ring any bells? It is threatening to admit that. We all want our church to be all light, don't we? One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the shadow conscious. But, asks Robert Johnson, does this mean that I have to be as destructive as I am creative, as dark as I am light? Yes, he answers himself, yes, but I have some control over how or where I can pay the dark price. I can make a ceremony or ritual soon after doing some creative work and restore balance in that way. This is best done privately and need not injure my environment or anyone near me. So I want you to consider this example, the following example, of how an individual pays the shadow so as to restore balance. It's a story that comes from Dr. Marie Louise von Franz and Barbara Hanna, both preeminent Jungian scholars, analysts. They shared a household in Küsnacht, Switzerland, and they had the custom of requiring whoever had some especially good fortune, they required them to carry out the garbage for a week. Did you hear that? Someone with especially good fortune, their job was to carry out the garbage for the week. This is a simple but powerful ritual act. Symbolically speaking, they're playing out the shadow side, and they're creating something positive out of it. Or I want you to go back to that example that I told about Robert Johnson, his own life, when his patience was sorely tested by some friends, and he grit his teeth, he powered through, but then later on, before he knew what was happening, he was in the middle of a fight with the nursery guy, an innocent person. He felt like a fool. His Mr. Hyde had popped out all of a sudden and restored psychic balance, but it was a destructive solution, okay? There was a rebalancing of yin and yang, but it was destructive. But he could have done something else. He could have done something different. He could have consciously picked up his shadow in this way. Once he could have found a place and time to relax, let down his guard, he could have found a private place. It would have just taken 5 minutes to do this shadow acknowledgement work. He could have gotten a towel, soaked it in water, rolled it up into a ball, threw it on the floor as hard as he could, and then yelled at it, "Ah!" Then again, and then again. 3rd time's the charm, okay? That's the point of shadow rituals. All he's doing is honoring the great principle of yin and yang in his life, and in the entirety of our natural world, all he is doing is honoring the great virtue of temperance. That is all that ritual is about doing. Seeking inner balance, rebalancing after the experience he went through. You too, whenever you engage in shadow rituals, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness, the shadow, conscious. We are called by such wisdom to eschew, to hate, to avoid the temptation to spiritually bypass the shadow parts of our lives and to always somehow live in the positive and in the light. But you know what? I call the doing of that toxic positivity. Boy, I think that needs more amens. That's toxic positivity. No one can live that way for very long because we are who we are. We are creatures of yin and yang. We are creatures that must learn the lesson of temperance, whether the hard way or the easy way. How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? Carl Jung once asked, I must have a dark side also, if I am to be whole. This is who we are. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde both, but the two can be balanced. It is in wholeness, not in goodness, where we will find the enlightenment that we seek. Amen. Let's say our extinguishing the chalice words together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again. Praises for the journey, we who carry on, searchers in the soul's deep yearnings, like our forebears in their time. We seek out the Spirit's wholeness in the endless human quest. Look inside your souls, the kindling, build the hearth our pilgrims do. Find the Spirit always restless, find it in each mind and heart. Touch and hold that ancient yearning, kindling for a newfound truth. Stand we now upon the threshold, facing futures yet unknown. Hearth behind us, wayside hostel, built by those who knew wild roads. Guard we ere their sacred embers, carried in our minds and hearts. So I want to know if you knew that there's such a thing as shadow work affirmations. Shadow work affirmations try to capture both the light and the shadow in our lives, not just light, not just like the regular affirmations do. I want to offer up 3 of these shadow work affirmations to you right now. Here's one. When I feel lost, may I become even more curious about what is happening, because then I am found. Or, sun and rain both make a garden grow. Or, whatever wisdom and compassion I have has come from all of who I am, including my mistakes. I am grateful for all of my life, not just the good parts. So as the song says, we are walking wild roads. We are walking wild roads, and as you walk the wild road of your life today and this week and this month, I'm hopeful that one of these or more of these affirmations might speak to you. You carry with you as they help to open up the path before you. So may it be. Go in peace. Thank you. Please. Good job, dear. How's it going for you? Good deal. You want to just get more experience?